The biggest misconception with knee pain is thinking something's broken when it hurts. In this video, you'll learn what's usually really behind it and how you can get rid of it. First, let's take a quick moment to see how a knee is actually built and structured. You can see here the shin bone, the thigh bone, the kneecap, and the fibula. Interestingly, for you perhaps, the fibula has nothing to do with the knee joint. It starts down here, and there are muscles in this area, and these muscles, there are two main important ones. The large thigh muscle we already talked about, and the calf muscle, the large calf muscle. The large thigh muscle has its origin up here, then it goes over the knee, all the way down to this point, to the so-called tibial tuberosity, and when it contracts, it helps to extend the knee. And the calf muscle originates from down here, passes over the Achilles tendon, running behind the knee joint up to the condyles. And when that muscle contracts, what effect does it have on the foot? It pulls the foot downward, but it also results in a flexion at the knee. And in our experience, these two muscles play a very important role in the development of pain, as well as in damage such as osteoarthritis or meniscus tears. Because what happens in everyday life? We're sitting all the time, and when sitting, you see, the leg is bent at a 90-degree angle. That means the muscle that comes up from down here, the calf muscle, it's actually shorter than in the position of a straightened leg. And this is exactly the reason it's always under so much tension. You might know this from the fact that many people get calf cramps at night because this muscle simply develops far too much tension during the daytime. And that large muscle in the thigh, it actually ends up becoming shortened when we are standing for extended periods of time. And walking. Then it's constantly working in a shortened range. We rarely ever go deep into a squat anymore. Some people never do that at all, and that's exactly why they also end up carrying excessive amounts of tension. And if both of them are too tense, too much force comes from up here, pulling the lower leg against the upper leg. And at the same time, from below, there is far too much force being generated that pulls the thigh back against the lower leg. And this leads to a situation where the menisci and also the cartilage that's located within the knee joint, whose entire purpose is to ensure smooth mobility and provide effective cushioning, end up being compressed far too much and excessively. And this is precisely what leads to the development of meniscal tears, meniscal detachments, and also osteoarthritis. Knee osteoarthritis is a very common condition. It consists of 4 stages, and in stages 1, 2, and 3, the cartilage progressively becomes thinner. Stage 4, there are already areas where the bones make contact, where bone is rubbing on bone. And that is precisely the origin of a great many of the misunderstandings that we encounter from our particular viewpoint. Because when someone with knee pain goes to the doctor or therapist, the problem actually starts much earlier, long before they even seek help. Most people whose knee hurts immediately start thinking, oh, is my meniscus torn or perhaps damaged? Am I injured in the ligaments? Do I maybe have arthritis? And that's so deeply ingrained in your mind that your very first thought immediately goes to the structure and to the potential for structural damage. And then you go to the doctor and he confirms it for you, says, well, perhaps it's not so bad. Then you get a painkiller prescribed, and the painkiller, sometimes it works for a while, sometimes it doesn't work at all, whatever. Many then eventually reach the next stage where they say, this can't go on like this. I have too much pain at night when sleeping, during the day when walking, when going upstairs and so on. And that is, of course, when it becomes the appropriate time to do an MRI. Because the underlying theory is that something inside the knee joint is torn or has some kind of damage, perhaps a ligament, or maybe even the cartilage itself. The meniscus is damaged, the cartilage is damaged. Now, after the MRI or X-ray, there are 2 possibilities. Option number 1, there's a small tear in the meniscus that's visible, or the arthritis is already second-degree arthritis. And then they say, aha, that's the cause of the pain, but we know. That's a huge misunderstanding right from the very beginning. And the reason we know this is because in people with pain and second-degree osteoarthritis, just relaxing the muscles and fascia makes the pain disappear, even though the osteoarthritis remains. But that was already a bit of a detour into the later explanation. Let's go back to the situation again. The second situation is the one where they don't find anything. The knee is in a tremendous amount of pain, but they can't find anything wrong. There's no arthritis in there. The meniscus is perfectly fine, they can't see anything wrong with it, and the blood work all comes back normal. Everything checks out perfectly fine. That is a situation that happens very, very frequently indeed, and yes, then they'll tell you it's what's called a non-specific knee pain. Non-specific means there's no apparent reason for it. For some patients, it gets really bad, because then they're told that. Everything is perfectly fine. Are you perhaps imagining that your knee hurts? Maybe you're just being overly sensitive. And the patient thinks to himself, he's in the wrong movie because it does hurt. He's really suffering a great deal, you know. Yeah, but maybe you should then go to a psychotherapist and see if there's not something more behind it all in the family or perhaps in your relationship. Do you understand what I'm getting at? They're trying to find any possible reasons to explain this pain, which just isn't explainable according to the conventional medical model. Because pain that's totally agonizing but has no clear structural cause, that kind of pain basically doesn't exist in the conventional medical world. As I've already mentioned earlier, we've frequently found in my more than 20 years of experience that when there's pain in the knee and there's a meniscus tear present along with some arthritis, that we can then actually provide help, is actually correct and consistently holds true in our practice, strongly reinforcing our view that the pain mechanism we describe is a reliable and observable reality in our clinical work with patients. That it's true. We say it's not the structure that's the primary cause of the pain, at least in the vast majority of instances. Maybe there are exceptions, but in most cases it's not the structure that's responsible, rather the tension in the muscles and fascia. And the interesting thing is, with thousands of patients over the last 35 plus years who had arthrosis and meniscus tears, partial tears, meniscus detachments, I don't have a single memory in which that would have been the cause of the pain. That goes all the way to stage 4 arthrosis. Even 15 years ago, I would have said, well, with grade 4 osteoarthritis, the bones are rubbing directly against each other. And that has to hurt. If you bang your shin bone on the edge of a coffee table, it hurts too, because the bone itself is actually quite sensitive to pain and it actively generates that pain signal. But then it became increasingly clear over time that we could significantly reduce the pain in people who had been diagnosed with grade 4 osteoarthritis, meaning bone on bone. That we could completely eliminate them, so much so that I myself found it almost unbelievable. And that proved itself time and again, and it was always the case that the state of the structure, a grade 4 osteoarthritis, which is pretty intense in terms of what that means, is completely clear to me, but it's simply been our lived reality for many years now. That this isn't the actual cause for most of that pain, and also not the meniscus tears, and also not the detachment, also not any ligament injuries, or any inflammatory processes. No, it's truly the tension present within the muscles and the fascia. And that makes perfect sense because according to our system, the mechanism functions via the receptors embedded throughout the knee area, in the knee itself, surrounding it within the tendons, the ligaments, and the muscles. In the fascia, receptors are located throughout, measuring tension, movement, pressure, speed, and even acceleration and deceleration. And all these measurement signals, according to our pain explanation model, they are calculated in the brain, compared, and from this the brain calculates a specific load on the joint. And at the moment when the load is so great that the brain can practically predict that the body's own self-maintenance capacity, its inherent regeneration ability, is insufficient to repair the damage, this triggers the transmission of an alarm pain signal, and this specific type of alarm pain is entirely unrelated to the actual physical structure. It's entirely focused on the body's intention to prevent those specific movements where muscular tensions are activated and could cause genuine harm, so the body actively works to block them from occurring. And these alarm pains, and this has become increasingly evident for over 35 years, make up the vast majority of all pain in the human musculoskeletal system. And from what I've just explained, it naturally follows that painkillers and surgeries for artificial joints don't actually solve the underlying problem at its root. Let's start with the painkillers. Painkillers are meant to suppress the pain as much as possible. Never mind that it often doesn't work, but sometimes it genuinely does work effectively and properly. But that's not so great when it does work, especially just for a weekend situation like that, you know. You have an event and don't want to suffer, no problem at all. But as a long-term solution, extremely dangerous. Why is that the case exactly? Because this alarm pain exists specifically to prevent damage from fully developing or to stop it from getting progressively worse if it's already present somewhere within your body. So if I now switch off the alarm signal, what does that result in? To actual damage. Look, you're driving along in your car and all of a sudden the oil warning light comes on. The oil pressure indicator illuminates quite brightly on the dashboard. You know you have too little oil in there. That's an alarm. Do you just keep driving? Carefree for the next few days? No, you'd be stupid to do that. You risk a seized piston. You drive to the next rest stop, check the oil level and top it off. And that's exactly how you should deal with pain. Pause. Be aware. This is an alarm. What do I need to do now? Many don't know that, but that's why you're here. We're explaining that for the knee today. And we will operate. The minimum tear is torn. Now it should be nicely cut out so that the tear can't progress any further and things like that. There was a period back in the 70s when a very large number of menisci was surgically removed to address knee pain. And eventually they came to realize, my God, what on earth had we done there? And they stopped it. And I always give a very simple explanation to the patients. I say, look, there's a chair, a hard wooden chair, and to make sitting comfortable, you put a cushion on it. But over time, that cushion gets completely worn out and frayed. It looks unattractive, it's stained, and perhaps a few of the seams have come undone. So do you throw it out now and just sit on a hard wooden chair? Or do you still want to be comfortable and simply leave it as it is and sit on it anyway? And it's exactly the same with the menisci. Besides, we now know that even meniscus tears, small tears, and similar kinds of issues can actually heal on their own. The body can heal that, which we didn't know before, but it's been proven now. And particularly, what about the underlying cause? The overly high tensions in the muscles and the fascia, so the thigh muscle and the calf musculature, they actually originate from the patient's everyday movement profile. Also your everyday life, if you're affected. And that leads to them becoming shortened. What does the surgery achieve? Post-op, many knees are initially pain-free. Why is that? Our explanation is typically that anesthesia is administered and it has a relaxing effect on the patient. And that's why the pain is gone. And many people think, thank God the operation helped me, the pain is gone. No, the pain is gone because the muscles have become fully relaxed. And then, inevitably, they come back again at some point. Unless you stick to rehab and continue with exercises, which then leads to a reduction in the tensions. And it's exactly the same with artificial joints. So many artificial joints are, in our assessment, implanted completely unnecessarily for no good reason at all. That could be solved quite differently by normalizing the tension of the muscles and fascia. A prosthetic joint is installed. The person resumes their normal daily life and muscular tension gradually begins to rebuild after the anesthesia wears off. There are also plenty of cases where people wake up from the anesthesia and the pain is immediately the same as before, sometimes even worse. But it's often better initially for a little while. But the underlying logic, the biomechanics, the biological reasoning behind it all, so to speak. The biologic, now I've got it, yes, it ensures that tensions build up again. And please don't assume that an artificial joint doesn't have any abrasion. The natural joint was destroyed due to the abrasion. The cartilage was destroyed, which then causes the same mechanical stresses to build up. I'm a mechanical engineer, a technically trained person, and I know that high-strength materials produce ultrafine dust. If there's too much friction, like in a mortar, tiny dust particles will also be created there. They infiltrate deep into your body's internal tissues, ceramic dust, metal, whatever components you've actually installed in there. So right away, here's some calming news for you, especially if you already have an artificial knee joint. You absolutely have to take on this challenge. Practice these, perform these exercises, and really make a point of relaxing the muscles so that your artificial joint doesn't produce that dust that spreads around inside your body. And if the tension is too high, the artificial joints are partly fixed with cement. They're attached in that specific kind of a manner. But if the forces are too high, then they will definitely become loose over time, and they loosen anyway. They generally tend to last about 10-15 years, as far as I'm aware, but sometimes it's only a few years. I'd like to point out that it could be due to the force acting there being too great, because the muscle tension is simply far, far, far too excessive. And when they loosen, inflammation occurs, and then they have to be removed and replaced, and more bone has to be taken out again. That you can do at most 2-3 times, and not even that. It means that it also ensures the tension is normalized, even if you already have an artificial joint. And I will never forget it. I once had the opportunity to work with a professor who fitted a great many artificial joints over the course of his career. When I eventually explained to him why it is that even after an artificial joint is fitted and the original joint, which one had assumed was the primary source of the patient's pain, is removed, the pain can still persist. The patient can still experience the exact same knee pain post-surgery, a phenomenon that every surgeon in the audience who performs these operations is already familiar with. And we can explain why this happens. Because when the muscle tensions build up again in that same way, the brain projects exactly the same alarm pain back into the area, specifically into the knee joint. It's still performing the same job it did before. That is why these methods don't work. As I said, taking a painkiller for a full week on vacation or just a weekend, all good, but not as a permanent solution. That's bound to go wrong. If you are able to follow everything I've just said, then it clearly leads to the solution for you and for many, many people who are suffering from knee pain and also from osteoarthritis and all these different kinds of damage. Namely, the only truly natural solution to completely halt the underlying issue, to enable the body to start functioning normally again, so to speak, and even to initiate the entire healing process once more, is tension, bringing them back down to a normal level. And then all of the natural processes and the inherent healing abilities that the body employs in order to successfully resolve that specific situation can fully take place. To solve the situation all the way to cartilage regeneration. Let's briefly check that off. A huge topic of debate. That's why we wrote this book, The Osteoarthritis Lie. Corresponding studies have long existed that prove cartilage can be regenerated. And I won't forget it, I once had contact a good 15 or 20 years ago with a very, very old orthopedic surgeon. One of the old school, he was over 80, I think, the man. And at some point he told me while we were talking about it, he says, I just don't understand why my colleagues nowadays somehow claim the cartilage might not regenerate. For us back then, it was completely clear that it can regenerate. I just know it the way I experienced it. I can't quite relate to it. Anyway, I can at least theoretically explain why nobody really ever seems to observe the cartilage regenerating. People don't observe that because the body simply isn't placed in the proper physiological condition to be able to do it. We know from stem cell research that stem cells do indeed have a tendency to migrate into arthritic joints. They are there. If they are present, the body is being repaired. But they aren't. Why? Quite simply, according to our explanation, because the tension is too great. And if such a small stem cell wants to turn into a bone cell and wants to repair there again and is constantly being rubbed again, how is that supposed to work? And there's a study from Utrecht University, Professor Mastbergen, I believe it was, together with his medical team, they did the following. They pulled the knee joint apart 5 millimeters, and after 4 weeks, the cartilage was back. I don't mean to suggest that you install a mechanism there that pulls the knee joint apart. But I have another variation. Perform the exercises to allow it to relax. And then the cartilage can regenerate in the same way, because the contact pressure has simply been normalized again. So what is now the only solution for this situation? The only solution is to normalize the tension within the muscles and the fascia, that the body functions normally again. And the first thing that happens, usually even in the first treatment, there are 2 methods to reduce this tension. One method is the one used by the physicians and therapists we've trained, which is osteopressure. These are specific pressure points located on the bone, where the brain is used to alter the programming. So that's how we explain it. The tension, which is directed by the brain into the muscles surrounding the joint, becomes normalized and properly balanced. Or you do the exercise directly, the one we're also doing right here for the challenge. In my firm belief, these 2 measures are genuinely the only things that I know of which actually lead to pain being eliminated in a completely natural way. And not eliminated in the sense of I push it away, I press it away, I inject it away. No, but rather the approach I take is to instruct the patient's own brain to completely cease the projection of that specific pain signal it is generating, because it's no longer needed since the tension ratios have been diminished. And once the pain's gone, it means the tension has normalized enough that there's no major danger left. And that's when the entire healing process can get started, if it's still possible at that point. And once you've convinced yourself of that and are able to grasp it, that's the best reason to take part in this challenge, to experience it for yourself. Because please don't just take my word for it alone. Don't believe any videos, don't believe any professors or any other person. There's only one thing you can, should, and must believe, and that is your own body and nothing else at all. If you have pain and you do something and the pain goes away, don't let anyone tell you it doesn't work. Just listen to your body and trust it, because he's proving to you that it is possible. And now we each listen to our own body. I listen to mine and you listen to yours. Please go on to the crawling position. It's possible that your knee already hurts now, so make sure to listen to your body. What we know is that in the rarest of cases, I've never experienced one that wasn't the case, not because you have sensitive knees, but as I explained earlier, there is this tibial roughness here, where your large thigh muscle attaches, where your bone is anchored, and that's precisely in that location where those receptors are situated, which are responsible for triggering the pain signal. So if you have a very tense thigh muscle right now, then this particular spot is significantly more sensitive compared to when the muscle is in a fully relaxed state. So you can try, look, here's a wooden floor, watch. I'm stepping on this. Knock a bit on the floor, that doesn't hurt me at all. Sure, I feel a certain amount of pressure and also a bit of pain, but nothing that I can't handle well or that would really bother me. And if that's the case for you, even on the mat or on the carpet, then it's because there's simply too much tension right in this specific area. And once the tension is released, you'll notice that your knees are less sensitive to pressure and you'll find it's much easier to kneel down comfortably. But now again, to figure that out more precisely. So if that's the case, that they're still so sensitive, put a pillow underneath and then the problem is solved for now. Now go ahead and carefully get yourself into the position. And then slowly lean your body backward, and you will eventually notice a tension in the knee that's affected. Then the tension increases, and eventually it becomes pain. And suppose you now have knee pain here in your left knee. That means that by doing this movement, we've put the muscle under tension. And this is now the point where the body says you must stop now, or the pain will get much worse, and it triggers this signal. So then you just stay like that for a bit and wait for like 20 seconds. And then you notice, hey, somehow it hurts less now. And then you notice you can go further down until the pain returns once more. And just from that, you can recognize that your pain is changing. It changes because you're stretching, and through the stretching, you take away a bit of the tension. If that had to do with the structure, with the torn meniscus, I wouldn't be changing anything about that. I'm not changing the arthritis either, so how can the pain change? Completely illogical, and that's exactly why you should just be open to the possibility that what I explained to you is actually correct. And when you come down, I can say from experience, your knee will be perfectly fine. And if you can lean back a bit, then I can tell you it'll be even better. But it's not absolutely necessary. You now know where your pain comes from. You've tested and found out how far back towards your heels you can sit. You can also measure it with a measuring tape to make it objective and know precisely. Our knee challenge will continue in the next few days. Stay tuned for sure.